I'd like to call the Charter Township of Chesterfield regular Township Board meeting for Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023 at 7 p.m. to order. Could we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk Berry, could you call the roll?
Supervisor Kersten.
Here.
Treasurer Elliott. Here. Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Trustee Joseph.
Here.
Trustee DeMink.
Here.
Trustee Vosberg. Here. Clerk Berry is here.
Item 4, approval of agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Treasurer Elliott. Clerk Berry?
Clerk Berry, aye. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 5, presentations. There is a presentation tonight. Clerk Berry? Director Bassett, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. So tonight we're here to swear in Officer Matt Ford, and I want to jump back just a little bit because he is a trendsetter and breaking new ground. So last year, in working with Supervisor Kersten, we talked about some of the needs and some of the retention issues and some of the challenges of finding great officers. And one of the things that we developed was a cadet program. So in that cadet program, we take individuals from our community who may not have experience in law enforcement. We work with them, and then we actually sponsor them in the academy. And Officer Ford is now going to be our first cadet, who we then sponsored in the academy, and will now become, as of this evening, our sworn officer. So I'd like to have him come up, going to step forward, get sworn in by our clerk, and also get pinned by a family member. So if we can go to the front.
Please raise your right hand. Repeat after me. Turn this way so everybody can see. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
of the Office of Police Officer
of the Office of Police Officer
in and for the Township of Chesterfield,
in and for the Township of Chesterfield,
County of Macomb,
County of Macomb,
State of Michigan,
State of Michigan,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, officer.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard, Officer Ford. I know there is an event planned at the police station. If you want to follow and excuse yourself, family members, you can. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Item 6, department reports. There are no scheduled department reports tonight.
I got one.
Trustee Domingue.
From Leisure Services, the Chesterfield Township Parks open for the season on Friday, May 26th. The splash pad will be open from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily. Plan to visit your favorite parks this year with plenty of opportunities for the whole family. That's all I have, sir.
Treasurer Elliott.
Just want to give a quick overview of the township investments. If you go to that, Tom, go to the next slide. So this is kind of just a quick breakdown of the investments that we have per bank. And we have continually been diversifying this as banks have been offering better yields on their CDs and various investments. You want to go to the next one? And investments per fund, you can see how on total makeup is. So the public safety fund is has 48% of the investments, and you can see that the interest accrued year to date is $135,026.37 for public safety. The general fund being 26%, and the interest accrued year to date is $75,658.19. And our sewer and water fund, which is 23% of the total investments, has accrued $46,143.93. And then the next slide, please, Karen. And we have certificates of deposit, and those are average yield is 1.56%. There is some that have not matured that had some of the lower rates from last year. Treasury bonds, which have been doing quite well, and those are average yield is 3.27%, and money markets are averaging 3.3%. And right now, currently, you will see that our investments are higher at this time of the year, right after the winter tax collection. And as we pay the bills, the investments go down over the year, usually ending at about $20 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. Chesterfield Fire Department is gathering public input for their upcoming accreditation. Residents and business owners are encouraged to visit the fire department's website and complete the short external stakeholder survey. There will also be an in-person question and answer session this summer where residents can help develop the department's strategic plan, which will guide the growth over the next 5 years. Visit chesterfieldfire.org for more information. Personal observation. Several years ago at a township construction locale, a worker was trapped below ground at an excavation site cave-in. It was necessary for a trained countywide team, excluding Chesterfield, to successfully effect the rescue. Since that time, multiple members of our Chesterfield Fire Department have been trained, certified, and equipped for the confined space rescues such as cave-ins and below-ground access spaces. 2 of our qualified firefighters serve on the Michigan Task Force. This past Wednesday, I had the opportunity to observe Lieutenant Gordon Trzynski and his crew employ the equipment as they trained for what was simulated as a rescue from a below-ground service tunnel access. With new and continuing construction and like endeavors, there will be of the essence in the event of unplanned future incidents. It's most beneficial to have this expertise provided by our own certified personnel within our fire department. Finally, upcoming event from the Chesterfield Historical Society on Saturday, June 10th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Sunday, June 11th, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Come see the St. Clair Voyageurs, 1750-era French fur traders, reenactors, and History Alive. A timeline of historical reenactors, historians in period clothing, encampments, and displays will tell a story of Macomb County's history from the early days of the fur trade through the war on global terror. A donation of $1 per person or $2 per family suggested. Food and drinks will be available for purchase at our historical village site. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Very briefly, first board, the Chesterfield Township Clerk's Office hosted the Macomb County Association of Municipal Clerks for a luncheon last week. County Clerk Anthony Forlini was also in attendance. The clerks discussed at that time the upcoming implementation of the requirements of Proposal 22-2 as it relates to elections. And as a follow-up, we will be meeting subsequently over the next several weeks and months with our state legislators as well as other election administrators to ensure that Proposal 22-2, which was adopted by the voters in 2022, is implemented successfully here in Chesterfield and throughout Macomb County. Secondly, we will be having our annual Shred Day on June the 8th. That is a Thursday from 12 to 2, and members of the public are welcome to bring their sensitive documents for shredding where they are able to observe the destruction of those documents here. The township will also be shredding all of its records that have reached their retention schedule and are of a sensitive nature as well. Please refer to our website, the clerk's page, in order to get more information. There are limits. You do not have to be a resident, but there are limits and methods by which those records and documents need to be brought to us for destruction. So please refer to our website, and if there are any questions, you can contact the clerk's office. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7, consent agenda. Woodbury.
All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on the consent agenda items are permitted. 7A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of May 9th, 2023. 7B, approval of the bills, payment of bills as submitted by the Finance Department. And 7C, to receive and file the Treasury report.
Do you have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Treasurer Elliott. Comments from the public?
John Spica, 53978 Connor Drive. Under the bill run, as most of you know, that I am fiscally conservative. It was, when I looked at it, we're on a spendemic here. So my concerns are starting with on the Verizon wireless. Our typical bill for the Department of Trustees is usually $150 to $160. And this time around, it was $306.24, which doubled. And when we move on and we look at the supervisor's office, the supervisor, went to Grand Traverse Resort, and the taxpayers on the lodging paid $584.40. Maybe you can explain to us what that was all about. And I've said several times, another thing the supervisor went to was the Macomb County Chamber's State of Macomb Township address. Another $50 charge that you reimburse yourself on the taxpayer's dime. At $103,000 plus benefits, I don't think you should be submitting anything under $300. And we've had this conversation before. Then we move on to the treasurer's office, and there was lodging for Treasurer Elliott at $504 for the MMTA. Maybe you can tell us what information you can bring back to the residents on that. But one of the biggest surprises was a reimbursement, and personally, I mean a $4 reimbursement for a meal at $90,000+ plus benefits is insulting to the residents. Supervisor's Management Office, again, the MTA conference, on a employee in the supervisor's office at $477.30 in meal expenses for that employee. I'm just curious, how many people do we have to send to these conferences? And Midwest Strategy Group, a $4,000 charge. I brought it up several times. What's our return on investment for the residents and taxpayers? I don't see any return on our investment, and we keep paying for this. Facility and operations, we've got vehicles out there that we're leasing, Ford Escapes at like $470 per pop. Brandenburg Park, we've got a couple things on the renewal, and I'm all about the flag, but at $2,636.99. Can you please explain to us what that's all about? And then there was another charge for the annual flag renewal at $863.01. So again, we got to watch every penny. We're not doing it, and we're constantly on a spendemic on the taxpayers' dime.
Any further comments from the public? No further comments from the public. I have a motion by Clerk Barry, supported by Treasurer Elliott, to approve the consent agenda as presented. Clerk Barry.
Clerk Barry, aye. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No?
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 8, public hearings, there are none. Item 9, the regular agenda. Item 9A.
Item 9A is to approve a recommendation by Supervisor Kersten to reappoint Shawn Elliott to the Parks and Recreation Commission with a term ending June 2026.
So moved.
Support.
Support.
Motion by Trustee DeMink, supported by Treasurer Elliott. I don't see Shawn here tonight. I'm sure he was busy. This is a new appointment. He completed a term previously. He's been very active just in the short time that he's on there. He's been a great asset to Parks and Rec and offering his expertise. So again, this is a request to apply, place him in a full term. So I'll take any comments from the board.
Shawn Elliott leads the Anchor Bay Fishing Club, and he is a very active volunteer in the community. And I always like to point out that he is not a relative, although we do share a very popular last name. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Any further comments? I have a motion by Trustee DeMink, supported by, public comments from the public.
John Spica, 53978 Connor Drive. This appointment, I support it fully. I got to know Shawn the first time I ran in this township for treasurer. Great guy, very active in the community, and he's going to do a great job. So I fully support this appointment. Thank you.
I have a motion by Trustee DeMink, supported by Treasurer Elliott, to approve the appointment for Mr. Elliott to the Parks and Rec Commission. Clerk Barry.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Item 9B.
Item 9B is to approve a request for the transfer of a Class C and specially designated merchant liquor license with Sunday sales permit for W.L. Hanna Inc., DBA Pita Peddler Mediterranean Bar and Grill, located at 46610 Gratiot Avenue, Chesterfield, Michigan 48051, and adopt resolution number 2023-15.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve, supported
Support.
by Trustee Joseph. I don't see them here either. Clerk Barry, you want to provide the background? Did I say it? Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm Kelly Allen, appearing on behalf of the applicants. This is Laura Youssef. And this is a request through the Liquor Control Commission to transfer the stock of the company from Joe and Laura's parents, who are deceased, to Joe and Laura, who are the adult children. They will be owning the Pita Peddler, which has been licensed since 2015, as 50/50 owners if approved tonight.
Thank you. Clerk Barry, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just want to make the board and the public aware that the applicant has provided all required documentation, and there has been no objection from any of the departments who have reviewed that information. The clerk's office endorses as well this transfer.
Thank you. Trustee Joseph?
Yeah, I just wanted to say appreciate this family. They've been an institution here. The parents were great, and the kids are great, and it's a great restaurant. And I would ask just one small favor. I know Captain McNair loves that place, so if you could maybe consider switching his dressing out, he could use maybe some fat-free for a while. If you would do that, please, it would really help the department. Thank you.
Sentiment is echoed. You guys are a great place. Nice having you here. Motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Trustee Joseph to approve. I'm sorry. Any comments from the public? Motion by Trustee or Supervisor Kersten, supported by Trustee Joseph to approve item 9B. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kersten. Aye. Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 9.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're all set. Thank you. Item 9C.
Item 9C is to approve an application from the Dearborn Fire Department to host a special event, the Dearborn Firefighters Burn Drive Bass Battle, to be held on Saturday, July 15th, 2023.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve.
Support.
Supported by Treasurer Elliott. The applicant is here. Guys, welcome to Chesterfield, long way from Dearborn, but
Yes, sir.
floor is yours.
Just we were recommended Brandenburg Park last year by one of Chesterfield's captains, Mr. Hubert, I believe, and said it's a great place to get the families together and stuff. Has a lot more than we. First year was last year. We did it at the Selfridge launch. It was a little bit small, a little bit cramped for what we require. It's just a charity bass tournament as a part of our Dearborn Firefighters Burn Drive. It's a charity that's been around for the past 60 years plus. We benefit burned, sick, ill, misfortunate kids all over Southeast Michigan. All the money goes towards that. It's a real good time. Last year we had 17 boats in participant. Hopefully this year we're looking for 25. It's just a good time, family barbecue, a bunch of raffles. We're just looking for some better land, more appropriate for what we're looking for with access to the water, and Brandenburg seemed to fit perfectly, so.
Great. Welcome to Chesterfield. I'm glad you picked us. Any comments from the board? Any comments from the public? I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Treasurer Elliott, to approve the request of 9C. Clerk Berry?
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
You'll work with Michelle to
Did
work
bring
out the
flyers
logistics.
if anyone wants them. I can set them up front.
Item 9D.
Item 9D is to approve a request by Autumn Lakes Subdivision for a commercial fireworks display to be held on Saturday, June 24th, 2023.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Demink.
Second.
Supported by Clerk Berry. Just this is a historical request. We're from the fire department that normally has managed this. They were off for a couple of years because of COVID.
Correct.
Director Bassett, go ahead.
Yeah, we're here this evening requesting approval. We have reviewed this in the Public Safety Department. We're satisfied with the application. We also have the petitioner here this evening if we have any specific questions, but again, we've reviewed it and are comfortable and are recommending approval.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Trustee Joseph?
Yeah, just a quick question. What was the cost of, what do we do? I know in the past we've had officers and firefighters out there dedicated to that event to make sure that it's safe, and typically the homeowners association would compensate for the police and fire. Do we have that in our packet in terms of the cost of that event?
So this is a cost neutral for the township, and you're correct. We have reviewed this, met with them in as regard to required staffing, and they'll be reimbursing the township for any costs that we incur.
Just as we always do, I guess. Thank you.
Comments from the public?
Mr. Supervisor?
I'm sorry. Trustee Vosser.
Thank you. As you already stated, they've been doing this for many years, and I just commend the Homeowners Association for hosting an event like that. It just adds, a family atmosphere and a friendly atmosphere to our community. Thank you.
Comments from the public? I have a motion by Trustee Demink, supported by Clerk Berry, to approve item 9D. Clerk Berry?
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 9E.
Item 9E is to approve a recommendation by the Treasury Department to adopt Administrative Procedure Order 15-2021 and Resolution Number 2023-18, Investment and Depository Designation Policy.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve,
Support.
supported by Treasurer Elliott. Treasurer Elliott.
We're recommending some minor changes to our Administrative Procedure Order, APO 15-2021. That was recommendations that were made to us when we submitted it for certification by the Association of Public Treasurers of the U.S. and Canada. And so they've asked a little bit of clarity on internal controls and some clarity on definitions on repurchase agreements and master repurchase agreements. So we added those, and then also added some banks and credit unions to be able to add some diversity. In here, you will also see some bank ratings that some of the organizations within the Michigan Municipal Treasurers Association, which we participate in, the Treasurer's Office participates in. You will see some bank rating also was attached to this, just to see kind of what the Treasurer's world looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments from the board? Comments from the board? Comments from the public? Seeing no comments from the public, I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Treasurer Elliott, to approve item 9E. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 9F.
Item 9F is to approve a recommendation by Facilities and Operations to purchase a Bobcat UW56 Toolcat utility work machine for a total amount of $80,813.29.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve,
Support.
supported by Trustee Vosberg. Mr. Sonnenberg?
Good evening. So I'll be brief and get to our questions if we have any, but we evaluated all of our equipment. This is something we talked about purchasing for some time. Also, since Supervisor Kersten's been here, we currently plow our paths with a full-size truck, and we've been doing more path work. And also we wanted to have a more versatile piece of equipment that did multiple things. So we have a lot of small equipment. We wanted to kind of combine that. So in our budget in this year, in our capital plan, we had two budget items. We had $47,000 for a piece of field maintenance equipment and another $125,000 for a tractor. What we found is we could combine both of those and get one really versatile piece of equipment. If you'll go to the next slide, Karen. What we're asking for is this Bobcat. It's a new system. It's got 71 attachments. And what's nice about this system is we can also use 5 existing attachments we already have for our current Bobcat. So we have a skid steer with our team, and we use it all the time. The problem is it's split between sewer and water. So in sewer and water, let's just say they have a water break and they need to clean up a small yard. Instead of tearing it up with a backhoe, they go in there and they'll do some site work. So we share that with them. But this piece of equipment gives us a whole nother level with plowing and all these different attachments. And like I said, we can use 5 to 6 of our current attachments. And when we do purchase new attachments, they can be shared between the two pieces of equipment. So that's why we're presenting this item today, hopefully to get it approved and move forward.
Thank you, sir. Comments from the board? Questions from the board? Trustee Anderson. Trustee Vosberg, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for the description. And in the packet, it talked about the $45,000 purchase, I'm sorry, not purchase, but original budget item. And now you explained you're going to just take it from another general ledger item within the same cost center, so there won't require any budget amendment. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Anderson.
A couple questions here. I know time ago we had requests to purchase about a $20,000 lawnmower. It I think this thing would float on the water. It was the selling point. It was needed for Pollard Park, the contour of that field. This was the device that would do it. And the next meeting, I believe the board or the township engaged in a 3-year contract, have an outside contractor to cut the grass. Before the snow flew one year, the township purchased 3 salt dispensers for dump trucks to spread salt on township roads and that, or I think it was somewhere in the area of high $30,000, low $40,000 cost. A short time later, the township engaged an outside contractor to plow the snow on township property. I just was looking, and you're the expert here. I'm looking at this UW56. I don't know. It's got a lot of bells and whistles on it. If it was needed, if something like this was needed, if we don't have anything in our warehouse now, I'm looking at they could be leased for periods of time from a day up to a month or even longer, considerably cheaper than this $80,000 bill. My concern is that township buys this, will we be entering in a contract with an excavator or a road repair person afterwards, after we purchase it? Thank you.
Great question. A couple of things. One, in regards to the track mower, that was a unique piece of equipment. We use that all the time. As you know, we have 500 acres of property. We cut a lot of lowland marsh areas. Our property on Jefferson, we have 2 parcels. They're swamps. We cut them with that. Our Monarch Meadows, if you want to call it, off 94, we cut a big portion of that. Especially in the spring, even our current contractor, he's reached out to us to hit a couple spots. So we use that. It's kind of a unique mower. We use it all the time. In fact, we use it sometimes because before I started here, you had purchased a John Deere similar to this, but it doesn't have the horsepower. It won't even pull the dragger at Pollard Field. So sometimes we'll use our zero-turn mower to pull the dragger at Pollard Field. And the turning radius on the John Deere is not, this is all-wheel drive, all turning. The other option, too, the other thing to consider is these vehicles are expensive, and they're expensive for a reason. There's this same vehicle, a 2009 with 3,000 hours at Ross Seals on Gratiot. They're asking $35,000 for it. So they do hold their value. They are pretty expensive. We could look at a lease option. I just know this is something that we're going to use it on a regular basis, and I just think that we would carry it long term. And like I said, we're just trying to make smart decisions where we have one vehicle that does multiple things.
Trustee Joseph?
I don't really have a question, but just in terms of Trustee Anderson's point, we got a similar presentation on the lawnmower that had tank wheels, and we suggested what about a $10,000 cheaper model that had dual rubber wheels. You gave a full presentation on the ruts and so forth as to why it was necessary for Pollard Park, and as he said, 2 weeks or 2 board meetings later, we contracted out the cutting for that field. So we have a tendency to gather all of this state-of-the-art equipment with lots of attachments, and then we contract out for the services. So your post-presentation was never part of your original presentation. The Monarch Meadows and all of that was never part of the original. And so I don't understand why we buy, to Trustee Anderson's point, you know, $80,000 pieces of equipment, $30,000 pieces of equipment, and then they're never used for the intended purpose, but we always find out when we ask later, oh, well, we still use that, we just do it for different. This to me strikes of that, and I would really be mindful of any contracts that come forward for snow removal if we have an $80,000 investment to do it ourselves and then we contract it out. It just doesn't make sense. And again, I don't need a response. It's not a question. It's a comment, and I'm not in the debate with you, Mr. Sonnenberg, so thank you.
Trustee Domingue?
Do we have anything else like this in our fleet over, let's say, at the PD?
So we have some old John Deere tractors, like I said, but they're 25 years old.
No, but I mean, do we have any, like a UTV, let's say, over at the PD?
No.
Director Bass, we don't have any UTVs at the PD? Okay. My idea with this is we can use it for a lot of things, because a lot of departments have UTVs nowadays, and they use them at special events for the officers to drive around. So this could be used as that also. I mean, it's a multi-purpose tool. I mean, it won't have, they can always put a light on it, but a lot of departments have it, and it could be used by the PD as a UTV vehicle for a special event, or if they got to go look for a kid in a swampy area or something like that where you can't get in with a, you know, walking or an ATV. Just,
That's the position that you're the expert there.
Comments from, you, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing. You know, our team has always plowed the bike paths at Brandenburg. Our contractors do most of our buildings, but if we're on site, we have a unique agreement where if we're on site during the day, we plow the snow. If it happens at night or the weekends, like we talked about, it saves us money to have the contractor do it. So we have a great relationship with our contractors. It's a shared responsibility. It doesn't make sense if our guys are on staff during the day to pay a contractor to plow snow, so we do that. Our bike paths we've always done, our paths here we've always done. This just gives us the ability to clean up those paths in the winter and then create paths in the summer.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public?
Mike Horton, 50393 Bauer. With this type of vehicle in particular, I actually have a lot of experience with this with my career in the military, and it is actually a very good investment to have. Is extremely versatile vehicle in the fact that it has the ability to interchange a lot of different attachments. You can use it as a lightweight forklift. You can utilize it in clearing pathways, like Josh had said, regarding not only with snowfall, but also you can have a broom attachment, which can actually clear out things like if there's excessive lawn mowing clippings on a path, you can actually clean it up almost instantly in such a manner. The back, the tailgate of it actually does support light salt performing situations, I guess, for snow removal. You can throw in a salt bed in the back there, and it's actually very helpful, performing multiple tasks for lightweight areas, such as parking lots or paths. Aside from that, it all depends on what the township has at its amenities for its attachments. But having this vehicle in itself, and along with, if you have a skid steer, it can actually create a good universal system. The situation, though, is that are you going to get the most bang for the buck for it? And the question would be what the prioritizations the township would be employing with it. It can be a worthwhile investment if the township is utilizing it as an investment. And I believe that it can be done in the township. It just depends on if it is going to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments?
John Spica, 53978 Connor Drive. Let's stay focused, guys. We're operating with a budget negative deficit of $3.5 million plus in the red. The last time I looked, this was an approval recommendation by Facilities and Operations for this Bobcat, not the police department, Mr. Deming. We subcontract our snow. We subcontract our lawn. As Trustee Joseph and Trustee Anderson said, over a year ago, Mr. Sonnenberg came to this podium and asked for a TRX lawnmower at $19,500. At the next board meeting, we subcontracted what he wanted to use that lawnmower for. So here we go again. I've heard we're going to use this on a regular basis. We need to make smart decisions. I mean, that's his typical MO, and I've been told on the TRX from people within the department that we've hardly even used that $19,500 lawnmower. So I know Josh likes his toys, but he's going to have to buy them on his money and not the taxpayer's dime. So considering that we've been down this road before, and this would be a no. So I would be an absolute no, especially, operating in a negative budget deficit. So thank you.
Any further comments from the public?
Joe Catich, I live in Sutton. I went to the open house at the water department last week, and basically, you've got a piece of equipment there. It's like a skid steer. It's got tracks, doesn't have wheels. And what they're proposing is to use the attachments that go on that present vehicle on this new one. And the only thing that I see differently, number one, it's got 4 wheels instead of tracks. and it's got a truck bed. Now, the things that you're mentioning about hauling snow or salt and everything, you've got trucks to do that. I used to see F-150s going down Jefferson plowing the snow every winter. I don't know where they went to. The tractors were always used in certain things that they want to do, with backhoes. This seems like to be something that'd be nice to have, but is it worth the investment right now? I don't think it is. What I also saw there is other equipment that Mr. Anderson was saying. I also saw the chippers, that we had an old chipper that wasn't any good. I saw the new chipper there. It was what, I don't know, $40,000 or something? I don't think that's being used very much. The old one was still there. I think you guys better hold off and look at this thing in reality and how much you're going to use it, and is it going to be worthwhile getting. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Trustee Vosberg, to approve item 9F. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
I'll roll with Demink. Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry. Aye.
Item 9G.
Item 9G is to approve a recommendation by Public Services to adopt Resolution Number 2023-17, the Michigan Department of Transportation Performance Maintenance Resolution for Municipalities, Form Number 2207B.
I'll make a motion to approve this, and just for, this is an annual request from MDOT. Mr. Kosier, you want to, Trustee Vosberg will support.
Yes, this is just our annual application that we have to submit in order to do right-of-way work on the MDOT right-of-ways.
Comments from the public? Any comments from the board? I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Trustee Vosberg, to approve item 9G. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk
Item-
Berry. Aye.
Item 9H.
Item 9H is to approve a recommendation from Public Services to authorize Supervisor Kersten to sign an agreement with the Macomb County Department of Roads to participate in the 2023 Dust Control Brine Program for county roads in Chesterfield Township.
Supervisor Kersten again will make a motion to approve.
Second.
Supported by Clerk Berry, and again, this is an annual request, dusting brine for the northern gravel portions of the township road. Paul, did I miss anything?
Nope, this will cover for 2 applications paid for by the county, and we will have the option to do more treatments if we do see necessary. But this is just an annual maintenance for the dirt roads up on the in the township.
Thank you. Comments from the public? Comments from the board? Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, I just wonder, Mr. Supervisor, do we have the ability, like, will you just let us know if there's an additional brine? Typically, when this comes, we usually approve or deliberate on 2 additional applications at the township's, expense. Is that an option this year, or do we anticipate a dollar amount for that, or do we know?
We do have in the agenda item for the additional applications, not to exceed 3 applications, and that would be a $20,010 cost per application.
Yeah, Mr. Supervisor, if it pleases the motion maker, perhaps I could offer a friendly amendment to just approve up to 3 additional. Those roads get terrible for our northern residents, and we have in the past just authorized the county to apply the brine when needed. It's a moderate expense considering what we get. So I'll offer a friendly amendment to include up to 3 additional applications for, I didn't hear the dollar amount, but.
I'll agree with that amendment, and that has come up in the past where certain areas asked for more applications, so up to 3 is your indication?
I thought the gentleman from the road said that we could potentially lock in up to 3 additional at a dollar amount?
Yes, yep, up to additional 3 treatments.
Thank you.
Supervisor Kersten will amend his motion then to approve this request with the leeway of allowing the additional 3 applications should the request be needed.
Continued support.
Continued support by Clerk Berry. Any further comments? I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Clerk Berry, to approve item 9H. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Item 9I.
Item 9I is to approve a recommendation by Public Services to utilize Hubble, Roth & Clark, Inc., HRC, to complete a water and sewer rate study at a total cost of $24,500.
Move to approve.
Trustee Vosberg, supported by Supervisor Kersten. Just a quick filler on this. Again, this is a series of requests that we've engaged with HRC. The first one was the operational cost study. The second was the reservoir system, which is currently underway. This is a little bit more in detail based on the economics of the Great Lakes water increases that are pending, and then hopefully lay a foundation for what our costs and services and rates will be in the coming years post 2024. Is that what we're targeting? Yep. With that, I turn the floor over to Jamie. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamie Burton with Hubble, Roth & Clark. It's my pleasure to be back before the Township Board. As Supervisor Kersten mentioned, this is not shown on here as the water storage study, but back in 2019, we started working with the Township on a connection fee study. This is to optimize or right-size the cost of the Township when people make connections to the system, both the physical connections and the capital charges. That was completed in July of 2020. Township put out a second RFP for a comprehensive water and sewer rate study, which this township decided to break into 2 parts. Part 1 was complete earlier this year, and that is the cost of service, which we outlined. Broke down the financial statements into the exact cost of service for water and sewer, how the money goes out of the system. So part 2 is what we're here to talk about this evening, is the full, complete water and sewer rate study, and we'll walk through that here briefly. That is really hard to see, so I'll focus on the left. It's in the packets, and I can provide this. So conventional rate study has 4 steps. Determine what the revenue requirements are. That is the cost of service study. And cost allocation is who should pay those costs or where those costs derive. Best example of that is the industrial waste charges on the sewer system are commercial enterprise cost only, and therefore you can, as you know where the costs go out, you can put in the revenue to make sure you're meeting those costs. The next 2 steps are part of this proposal, which is the community goal setting, which we'll talk a little bit more in a second, and then how you design the rate. Once you determine how much money you need to collect, then you can determine how to collect it. And we'll talk, and part of the study is to determine how the township can take the risk factors financially of your service providers and mitigate those to your ratepayers. So when the music stops, as they say, you're not left standing up without a seat. So what came out of the existing rate study is system expenses minus depreciation, which is a real expense, but not one that you usually put into rates. There was system expenses exceeded current system revenue by about $2 million. That's not to say that rates need to change. It means this part of your fee structure, part of your moving forward. That just, we've got a challenge here to meet. And when I talk about risk, well, a community goal setting, if you are paying out in a manner which is materially different than you are collecting money in, then the township holds that risk, that financial risk. So I wanted just to highlight some categories here for the community to see and why rate sizing or rate design and how you collect is appropriate. So last 5 years, average sewer increases from your service provider, 3.7%, 2.9% on the sewer side. And how you collect your revenue is 71% variable based on actual water sales and 82% on the sewer side based on sales, leaving 29%, 16% on those fixed fees that fixed service, readiness serve, and other things on the bill. But currently, you're paying 60% of your water bill on a fixed monthly charge and 100% of your sewer bill on a fixed monthly charge. That provides a 16% to 100%. If you don't sell enough water, which the sewer is based on, for sales, it doesn't matter. You're paying 100% of your costs to go out on a monthly basis. So that is just a risk mitigation factor. And to highlight that a little bit further, in the last several years, off of your average water sales, you've been as far as almost 6% under and almost 3% over. So almost an 8% swing in that rate, and you're collecting 71 and 82% of your revenue in that fashion. So it provides a lot of risk. So a little bit of background. In 2017, there was a study performed. It's called the Revenue Sufficiency Analysis. And out of that, it anticipated just over 10% rate increases per year through fiscal 2020. It included an anticipated 5% from Great Lakes Water in the Macomb Intermediate Interceptor Drainage District. There's 3 Ds there. That hasn't come true. The 5% has been less than that by both parties over the last few years. And the township has done a good job of passing through those rate increases over the years. However, your costs, your CIP has moved on without any cost escalators that I'm aware of at the time. So we know what the cost of service is. We need to work on the risk mitigation. We need to have an honest conversation about affordability and equity in the ratepayers. The people who use the system should pay appropriately for the system. However, there are certain things that everybody might want to pay for equally. Everybody gets one water bill, no matter how much water you use, for example, okay? But these are the topics that would go into some of the community development that this study would try to get a handle on and see if there's a more equitable way to collect rates. Little reminder, it's really, water and sewer sounds very simple, but realistically you're selling 4 products in the same pipe on both sides of the system. So your system, you have fire flow, you have peak flow, you have maximum day, and your average demand. Those are all very different cost escalators and cost impacts that may have to your residents. For example, you design your system to handle a reasonable fire flow, but if no one uses any water through their fire meters, no one's helping to pay for that. So we should be asking these questions, right? And obviously sanitary has got kind of the same kind of 4 topics. This is just our work plan, which is laid out in our proposal, just in a different way. Put this in there so if this was ever published, folks can see it. The one change on this slide, we've been talking about this for a few months, is we've changed our meetings to be all in person, not virtual meetings. We thought some of them could be done on Teams or Zoom, but we thought it'd be better to meet in person. So it kind of works our way through our goals. And then, so the deliverable. So there'll be a draft and a final report presented to Township Board, 2 in-person meetings. And we expect 2 meetings at the Township Board level, 1 for an introduction and 2 for a discussion on what to do next. Obviously, if we make any changes to the structure or how the rates go out, there should be some amount of public relations materials to explain how that will look. This is not intended to go into effect until possibly next July, okay? There will be a rate discussion, or you probably already had one related to the rate change that start July 1 of this year. This study would end up deliverables at the end of calendar year 23 for a discussion moving into 24 budgeting and 24 rate setting. So any changes to structure rates would be at that point. Our total estimated cost per all its asks is $24,500. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Thanks, sir. Questions from the board? Trustee Anderson.
I'm really not saying this as a question, but I'm looking forward to, if this goes through, the results you come up with. I really am, and how it'll positively impact our township. I just want to mention that since 2015, I'm not going to mention the names, but we've had, like, you'll be the 4th study that this board is engaged in. All 5 figures for them. You're probably one of the more inexpensive ones compared to your predecessors. And I'm looking forward to what you come up with, but it just seems like every couple years we have another study, and there must be a tremendous shelf there somewhere with these. Thank you.
Any further questions? Trustee Bosworth.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Thank you for the presentation on how you plan to proceed should you get the contract, and I do approve this. I am curious as to, can we assume that the rates will be going up just based on the fact that we're charging more, so we have to pass that cost, share that cost somehow with everyone? So this will, results of this study will perhaps give us a tool to use in making those decisions on how that will transpire at the time next, about a year from now.
That is the goal.
Right.
And as Trustee Anderson said, there have been 7 previous studies, but nothing was done about them. They laid a groundwork, but no action was taken. What I've asked HRC to do, and why he's here, this is the 3rd time, study the operation, which was the first one. We received that. We got a good idea and a plan. The reservoir study, which he's recently doing to see how that's going to fit in the future. Now this one is the actual rates, what they look like. And the variables, Jamie, if I'm speaking out of expertise, the variables are going to be, is that reservoir system feasible? Is it not feasible? Is it going to fit into this? And also, we are maintaining our rates, which are the lowest in the region, basically right now by growth. That's what's keeping our fund in a stable environment. So I'd like to get away from that. If the economy collapses, if this changes, I'd really like to have a foundation, and we'll put all of these together in one piece to where we have a clear plan moving forward and what it's going to look like for the community in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the ultimate goal.
Right. There have been numerous studies that, since in the time I've been here, and even just as before I was on this board, hearing about them. And I think that, well, we know we need to. We've put it off long enough. We need to make some changes, and it will affect the residents, but it affects the residents now in a different way. So thank you.
Thank you. Jamie, did I miss anything?
No, sir. I want to add this. You have pressure from your service providers, okay? And rates are going up. It's in the news every day, inflation, et cetera, et cetera. And you've got your own internal things. We take all that in your capital improvement plan. We're going to go where the data takes us, okay? And the data is all encompassing. It's your reserves, it's your rates, it's your pass-through. So we're going to go to the bottom of that and also come up with the most equitable distribution and how that should be handled and mitigate that. Otherwise, at some point, and it has to be fiscally responsible. Let's say it this way. But if you got yourself into a problem, which we will find out, it didn't happen overnight, so it doesn't, you have a reserves. It doesn't mean we have to get out of it in one night. We don't need bloodshed, right? We can make this palatable for your residents. But we're going to go where the data takes us, and we'll make this thing, we'll provide some good opportunities and good recommendations to this board.
Thank you. Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, as was stated, there have been several rate studies. The one that I particularly liked the most was the rate study that called for nearly a 50% increase in water rates, and it's why I proposed and we adopted a water rate advisory committee. And so we met for several months over a course of a year. We had experts on our committee. We formed a we concluded our findings with a white paper. And one of the things that we talked about in terms of Mr. Kersten's, nothing's ever been done, is the operation itself, and do we have maximum efficiencies? And so we've added things over the years like BS&A software to track projects. We spent considerable money on BS&A software, and then we spent considerable money to improve our servers to accommodate the BS&A software. And we heard from the supervisor not too long ago that we were way, I believe from the original presentation, way behind in the implementation and training of how to track our BS&A program. Like, that was supposed to give us a lot of insight on the efficiency of the water rates. And so the way that we've passed through Great Lakes Water Authority and sewer increases is we do it through our RTS. That was a decision that came out of the water rate, and the decision was made because we don't have a handle on the efficiency of our water department. So we agreed at that point that we would pass no additional costs on for maintenance and deterioration of our system through the water rate. We would just add incrementally exactly what the pass-through was, what the increase was. We've been operating that way for a long time because the previous discussions were all about making sure that we are delivering water, fresh water, safe drinking water, and taking sewer waste from residents in the most efficient way possible. You can't really begin to talk about rate increases until we're assured that we have efficiencies in the department. And it's not an attack on anybody, it's just a flat out, fact. We haven't had a DPW. We lost in the past 2 years, we've lost our DPW department head and the number 2 guy. And we moved our engineer over to supervise the water department. And we'd have really not good handles on the commingling of operations between the facilities and operations side and the water side, and this all gets passed on to the water and sewer consumer in a neat little package that really, at the end of the day, really all we're doing here, I think, is trying to legitimize what we know will be a significant water rate increase, and I believe it's attributed to mismanagement, and I don't see the need for a study until we get our house in order. So if we're going to go out and spend money on big projects and we don't really have a capital improvement plan or a restoration or a depreciation plan, we take all of this money from residents and water customers to repair the depreciation, and then we don't put an annual capital improvement plan. We end up fixing things on an emergency basis, which is 3 to 4 full times what it would cost if we had a solid capital improvement plan. Trustee Dominka, I know your father headed up the very first department, and you have to lay out what it is that's going to be potentially a Category 4 failure 3 years from now, and pay for that now as a maintenance. We don't do that. So we're going to run into water rate problems, and this HRC is a great company. The man at the podium is brilliant. He knows his stuff, and he's just telling us what we can do on the inside is, from an executive standpoint, make sure that we're as efficient as possible before we come back and say, there's no mistake about it. This is a precursor to rate increase, and they're going to use HRC to legitimize and plaster over ineffectiveness, and that's a management and an executive decision, and that's really where we need to go. That's where we need to go first before we bring in experts like this. And that's just my opinion. I don't have a back and forth all night. I've made this statement many times, and I was very active on the Water Rate Advisory Committee. It's the same thing I've been saying for the better part of 10 years.
Any further questions from the board? Comments from the public?
Joe Catich, I live on Sutton. I hope this is, I guess, supposed to enter into when we're going to hear from the rate board as to what's going to happen here. You're going to have a town meeting for this to invite the public, walk them through this. Is this what this is all about right now, or is this a decision that we're going to accept what he has? I'm looking at it. Do you want to answer that? No? Okay. Well, then I'll follow up with the other thing. I was part of the water board that Trustee Joseph sent We walked away from that in 2015, wrote a white paper saying how the water has to be managed and run. As clear as a bell. We're the ones that actually recommended that we hire a civil engineer, or a professional engineer actually, to work with the department. That didn't happen. Whatever that happened, when Dan Echevetti was here, there was money that was in the funds collected through the customer receipts that supposedly allowed for at least $2 million a year to replace old lines. That never happened. And when you took over from Echevetti, I asked you to look back at that because I assumed at that time, because none of that was done, that fund, instead of being at $11 million like you said it was when you entered in, that fund should have been at least $6 or $7 million higher. Where did that money go? I think Trustee Joseph's being polite about saying we have to manage better. It's not managing the department, it's managing the money and where the money went. We never found that out. I recommended to you back then, you commission a board, 3 people, to oversee the water department. You didn't want to hear that. And now we're here, how many years later, going through the same thing that we went back in 2015. And I think the public deserves to know what happened during that time. Where did that money go? What was the mismanagement? How are you going to fix it? Rather than just turn around and lay it on the public saying you're going to have to make up, what, $90 to $100 a period to make up for all the money that was lost or mismanaged? It's not the right way to do things. If you're going to have a town hall meeting on it, put out whatever he's got together to everybody to look at, send out a letter, not just put it on the webpage that we're going to have a town hall meeting on wage rights. Do it the right way. Let people look at it beforehand, come here, and ask questions about what's going on.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public?
John Speaker, 53978 Chesterfield. If I ran a business like this, like the supervisor and the majority of the board runs this township, I'd be out of business. It boils down to accountability. The only accountability that these members have is when it's election time. And the residents have to be informed on what's going on, what they're doing and what they're not doing. Mr. Kadich is right. There's a lot of money that should be in that fund that they can't answer where that money is. Mr. Joseph, spot on. We don't have our house in order in this township. You can't put people in job positions that aren't qualified. Bottom line, I don't care if they're friends or relatives. And we've got way too much of that going on. Here in Chesterfield, we've lost a lot of good people that were qualified to do the positions that are no longer here, and they're at other cities and municipalities. Supervisor Kersten said we've had 7 previous studies. 7. Do you know how much money, taxpayer money that is? That's over $250,000, $275,000 shelved. Our money that they did absolutely nothing with. Why do a study if all you're going to do is shelf it and you don't want to hear the truth on what needs to be done in this township? Of course, the bottom line is we're going to have an increase in our water rights. Great Lakes Water Authority is going to pass on an increase to us, and we're going to pass an increase on to the residents. That's normal. But in that increase, we're going to have more than just the Great Lakes Water Authority increase. What's not being talked about is in this study, I hope they look at the sewer line that we gave the wealthy, well-connected, and donors on 26 Mile Road. How is that going to affect the taxpayers' water bill? So again, I mean, there's a lot of house cleaning that we need to do in Chesterfield, so, and until we get our house in order, and I as of right now, I don't see any hope in that, so. A study isn't gonna fix what's wrong up there. A study is a recommendation to implement it, but when they don't implement the recommendation, it's just wasted money again. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Yes, there were 7 previous studies. I don't know what they did with it because I wasn't the supervisor at the time. I did read them, I'm aware of them. So is HRC. Any thoughts that this will not be presented or acted on or completely wrong? This will come back to the board and there will be a complete review of it, all 3 phases of it. And there may be a 4th. We will get there. And it's not gonna be tucked away. It will be discussed right here and open, and the board will decide what we're gonna do and what direction we're going. Did I miss anything, Mr. Jamie or Paul? Did I miss anything?
No.
Treasurer, thank you. Treasurer Elliott, floor is yours.
The last study was done in 2015, is that correct? The last study was done in 2015.
I think so.
Yeah.
I saw it 2017. Was
2017, there was one?
Stantec of rate efficiency. It was the water and sewer revenue analysis. I think it was dated 2017.
So there was something done in 15 and something done in 17?
Correct.
Okay, so 17, 6 years ago.
Not including the white paper, which I believe was somewhere in that same time frame, but we've gone through all that as well.
But essentially, the last one was done 6 years ago?
Correct.
Has there been changes that you would say are significant since then?
A couple things have happened significantly in the last 6 years. How Detroit, Great Lakes Water, how the sewer collect their bills have changed substantially. They've ramped up over those 6 years from 0% fixed to 60% fixed, up to 100%. They did a rate reallocation on the mid and the percentages that pay. And beyond that, and they're kind of tapering off now, but the last 6 years have also been highly litigated over water and sewer rates and water sewer departments, and really focusing somewhat on that equity issue and transparency and where all the money goes. So I think a lot has changed, but the fundamentals are the same. How much do you need to collect and who should pay it, and how do you go about making that work? So.
Thank you. Any further questions? I have a motion by Trustee Vosberg, supported by Supervisor Kersten, to approve item 9I. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 9J.
Item 9J is to approve a recommendation by Public Services to award the Brandenburg Park HMA Pathway contract to the only responsible bidder, James P. Contracting, Inc., in the amount of $70,996 for a total project cost of $85,195.20.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve.
Second.
Clerk Berry will support. Mr. Kosier, go ahead.
Yes, this is to repair, well, not repair, but to finish off the pathway that was done when they did the shoreline repair. There's the gravel pathway right now, and we're going to put the HMA over it. We were only able to get one responsible bidder to come out and bid for this one due to the timing of the season, but we are trying to get this all in place before the bass tournament.
Thank you. Comments from the board? Trustee Joseph?
Did you say in place before the bass tournament?
Yes.
Yeah. Do we know how much the total shoreline project has cost the township at this point?
I wouldn't be able to answer on that. The total shoreline project. This one here is separate from that. This is just to get the pathway done.
Oh, it's not involved in the shoreline project at all?
We're just gonna, there was a aggregate pathway put down for the construction equipment to access the shoreline when they did that project. And
Right,
so we're
yeah.
gonna take that, and instead of just letting it fail, we're gonna use that aggregate base there to be able to put a HMA pathway there and save a little cost for the township.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any further comments? Comments from the public? No comments from the public. I have a motion by Supervisor Kersten, supported by Clerk Berry, to approve item 9J. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Nope.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Item 9K.
Item 9K is to consider for first publication the Chesterfield Township Marijuana Establishments Ordinance.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve the first reading. Do I have support?
Second.
Supported by Clerk Berry. Just some quick background, and I'll defer to legal counsel on this. This is an ordinance that has been drafted some time ago when the initiative passed in the township. It was under consideration. There was a couple of drafts that were originally presented and discussed. There was a presentation, I believe, back in 2018, which was originally presented. And this is kind of the final version that has been presented to the board for review and discussion tonight. With that, I'll defer to legal counsel who drafted it and can speak in detail as to the substance of the ordinance. Mr. Siebert.
Yeah, I presented the board with a copy of the Marijuana Establishments Ordinance, and as the board will recall, the process for marijuana establishments in the township require two separate ordinances. One is the zoning ordinance component, and the zoning ordinance component requires a regulatory component as well. The Planning Commission has held probably 6 months of informal discussions at the Planning Commission meetings. They've held the required public hearing under the Township Zoning Enabling Act. The Planning Commission has recommended unanimously that the zoning ordinance be sent to the Township Board for consideration. It's my understanding that the zoning ordinance will be presented to the board in June. The intent of presenting the regulatory component tonight is so that the board can review the ordinance, give me any input on whether or not there are any recommended changes, and adopt it for first publication. Being charter, as you know, you have to publish this ordinance twice before it can become effective. If we review it tonight and approve it for first publication, then we'll bring it back in June at the same meeting that you review the zoning ordinance amendment. If they're both satisfactory to the board, we'll approve them both at the same time. They will become effective at the same time, and now you will have a zoning ordinance that addresses the location and land use regulations for marijuana establishments, and you'll have the regulatory component, which will take the applicants through the licensing process for the issuance of a license. You've had an opportunity to review this ordinance. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but I'll just highlight what you're already aware of after having reviewed it. When somebody comes to the township for a marijuana license, it is a precondition of being able to operate into the township. So assuming that the applicant has zoning approval and they're in the proper zone, and you'll deal with that in your June meeting, they will then have to apply to the clerk's office for a license. That licensing process will require the applicant to submit information that will be on a form that will be created by the township clerk's office. Parenthetically, we've held at least one meeting with the township clerk, treasurer, supervisor, planning and zoning director about that process. It's my understanding that the clerk wants to streamline this as much as possible. It's going to be in digital format so that when an applicant appears before the township, this will all be digitally submitted. It will be then shipped to the various departments. It will go to the zoning and planning. It'll go to building. It'll go to fire. They will all review it independently, report back to the clerk to make sure that they are compliant with all of the other regulatory ordinances in the township. Also, as a precondition of local licensure, they're going to have to obtain a license from the state of Michigan, which states the obvious under the what I'll call the recreational statute. You cannot operate a marijuana establishment in the state of Michigan without getting approval from the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, which is a branch of LARA, which is the licensing and regulatory agency of the state of Michigan. So they will have to have two licenses, one from the state of Michigan, and then they will have to have a license from the township. The licensing information that they will provide to the township is substantially less onerous than they have to submit to LARA. The rules and regulations that are in the administrative code that set forth the regulations for LARA are, to say they're exhaustive is an understatement. So by the time they get to the township, they will have already compiled all of the information that they're going to need to fill out the forms at the clerk's office and proceed through the process. Again, as I indicated, when the license comes in, the forms are filled out, building will take a look at it. It will either be an existing building or a new facility. Zoning will take a look at it to make sure they're in the appropriate zoning district. Fire department's going to take a look at it as they would any other new land use that came into the township. Once they comply with all of those requirements, pay the necessary licensing fee, which will be established by the township board, they will then be eligible for the award of a license. The board decided a year or so ago after the ballot initiative that all of the allowable marijuana establishments under the regulatory statute would be permitted, and they are permitted in unlimited numbers. So anyone that comes to the township satisfies the application requirements, pays their fee, gets the blessing of zoning and planning and the fire department, will get a license. And unlike some communities where there's a limit on number, there are unlimited numbers in the township. And that's the way this entire regulatory ordinance has been structured. There are provisions in here for a process if there are violations. If an applicant who receives a license is operating the facility in a manner that is inconsistent either with state law or with the local ordinance, as a condition of obtaining a license, they consent to inspection at any time during regular business hours. That is, as an aside, the exact same requirement that the state of Michigan requires as a condition of obtaining a license. If there is a violation, they'll be notified by the clerk's office. They'll be given an appeal period to come in and try to remedy the problem. If they can't, the clerk has the ability to suspend or to revoke the license. They have an appeal process, which is affording them their appellate rights to come before the township board for review. So there is what I would call a procedural due process component to this as well. It's a one-year license. It has to be renewed annually. We structured this so that the renewals are automatic, that they don't have to jump through a bunch of hurdles when they come back again. I've also included provisions for amendments if they have a license that they've obtained and they're going to have amendments to that license. I've tried to streamline it so they can simply come into the clerk's office, submit what those amendments are to the extent it requires any additional review by planning and zoning or by building or by fire. That can easily be taken care of. Hours of operation are set forth in here, which are typical of other communities that have similar ordinances. And that's an overview. Any violation is a civil infraction. That's called out in the state statute. And again, what we tried to do is when I tried to look at ordinances in other similarly sized communities in the state of Michigan. I looked at communities substantially larger, some more rural. The more rural ones were really not applicable. The communities that I looked at that were at least our size or larger, in many instances had much more complicated application processes. But after looking at the LARA rules and how extensive they are, when I met with our team, which was our planning consultant, we met with the clerk, supervisor, treasurer, met with the planning and zoning director, met with your building official. We talked through these issues, and it didn't make sense to have the applicant who's already gone through all of the hurdles at the state level to come back and replicate that effort at the local level. It didn't make sense to me that they do that. So we substantially streamlined it. We don't require criminal background checks. All that's been done at the state. And we think that this is something that will be fairly user-friendly to the applicant. The hurdles are not hard to get over as long as they've met the state criteria. And I'm open for any questions by board members.
Comments from the board? Any questions? Clerk Berry.
Not so much questions for legal counsel as was pointed out. We had a meeting with the 3 full-time electeds and the attorney just to go over some thoughts that I had. As many of you know, I have been very, I would say, experienced in this particular issue as far as I have, for the last 6 years, been researching and educating myself on this issue as soon as it became legal in Michigan, even from a medicinal standpoint. And I served with Trustee Joseph and Trustee Anderson, and then also Supervisor Kersten on the, at the time was the Public Safety Director on our cannabis committee that was created by the board. And all in all, I think this ordinance is pretty good. Just a couple of things that I just kind of wanted to bring up to the board. And these are things that, again, the attorney has already kind of weighed in on. I had about 12 different points that I just wanted for clarification. My concern with these ordinances is that they be clear, that they be transparent, that they be fair, and that they be easily understood by anyone who might read them. And I think it's done very well from a certain perspective. Just a couple of housekeeping matters. And then there's a couple of policy issues that I wanted just to bring up to the board to have some discussion on. So I don't know the best way to kind of go about that, Mr. Supervisor. I can kind of go through them one at a time, or
No,
go?
please.
Okay. So under definitions, which is our section 3, you'll see where we list out what an applicant is, what a business manager is, licensee, and so forth. The applicant and the licensee both have to be 21 years of age, but I'd also like it to be included that the business manager also, just have that spelled out, that that person must also be 21 years of age. That's kind of a housekeeping matter. I think it's inferred, but I think we should spell that out, that that individual has to be 21 years of age as well. And those who have licenses know that that is in fact the case. It's a requirement of the state license, but I'd like to have it spelled out in our local ordinance so that it's consistent with the state requirement as well. So there's no ambiguity there.
Just a point of information, Mr. Supervisor, and Clerk Barry, not to interrupt you, but I'm just waiting for recognition from you, Brent. Yeah.
Trustee Coe?
So could we just maybe list the, because I know you're thorough and you provide, narrative with each one, but there's quite a few there, and I'm familiar with them. If you just wanted to tick off which ones so that we could expedite it, I think they're pretty reasonable and self-explanatory.
Sure. So under section 5, this is probably more of one that I'd like to have discussion from the board on. The ordinance that was passed had to do with MRTMA, which is the recreational. But this ordinance does not address medical. And so I just wanted to, I had a question if the board would like to include medical at this time, or if that's something that we would want to do later, and perhaps again, I'll tick them off, but then maybe Township Council.
Before you go on to that one, we had this discussion, and it does not,
Yes.
it does not include medical.
Right.
And medical is a different animal. There are two components to medical. There's the medical, Michigan Medical, the Michigan Marijuana Facility Licensing Act, which is a different animal and has different requirements. And then there's the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, which is completely different. That deals with caregivers and registered patients. That is a completely different animal. So if you want to fold that in here, I think it's a mistake, but if you want to do that, this is going to potentially require a redraft, and that's going to slow this down.
Okay, I just wanted,
Okay.
because I know that there are individuals that have the question, that have asked us the question, so I'm glad that we were able to clarify it.
People that are looking for medical marijuana and want to obtain, they get a doctor's script for it, and they put their caregiver up through the registry, through the state, still will be able to do that. But they're not going to be able to walk into a retail dispensary with their 10-year-old kid and get medical marijuana. It's not going to work.
Right. One of the other points, too, is under the application requirements under Section 6, sub 2D1. It talks about denying an application for a marijuana establishment by the state or the municipality, or if the applicant has had a marijuana establishment license suspended or revoked. The question that I had there is, I think we need to include language in terms of if it was a preliminary determination that it was revoked on, because there may be a preliminary determination made by the state where the applicant would answer, yes, it was revoked, but then on appeal or at a later date, that was remedied. So perhaps that we should ask that question on whether it was a final determination of revocation rather than something that happened preliminarily. So
remember, though, this is not a denial of their license. This is simply information that they're going to provide.
Correct. It's just that when they're answering the question, the information they're going to provide to us, if we have an application question that says, have you ever been denied an application for a marijuana establishment by the state or other municipality, or had a marijuana establishment license suspended or revoked, and they need to answer yes or no, it would depend on perhaps the timing in their particular case. They may have had it revoked or suspended or had some adverse action taken in a preliminary determination, but then upon final determination that was remedied. So I just think we need to clarify it for the applicant when they're answering that question, how should they answer that? I just think it's a point of clarity that the applicant needs to know how they should answer that question honestly and completely. Whether or not we want to have a narrative box that would open up, that they would provide additional narrative. I just think that's an area that's a bit ambiguous that needs to be clarified, so it was a concern for me. Under section 6.2G, it says that a state license issued by the Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency pursuant to the MRTMA that allows a person to operate a marijuana establishment subject to local municipal approval. I'm wondering if we might want to change the language state license to MRTMA pre-approval, because the state license, they wouldn't have a state license issued until they receive local municipal approval. So that's, again, just a language change that I'd like to suggest we make, and that's changing state license to MRTMA pre-approval. Under section I-1, under that same section, we're asking for a description of the products and services to be provided by the marijuana establishment. I think I'd like a little more direction, perhaps to have the board determine what does that mean. Does that mean we want the applicant to provide us with a list of SKU numbers? Do they just need to provide us a narrative form? When I'm evaluating it, when this application comes in, what do they need to provide us with? Perhaps be a little more descriptive or a little more exact on exactly what do they want us to provide us with, because their products and services are going to change based on the market. And so what do they want us to give? What do we want them to give us? If we want to leave it just as it is and leave it up to the discretion of the clerk, that's fine. But we may want to, that might be a point that we're going to get questions on later in terms of what exactly do you want from us.
Let me make it easier. Do we care what kind of products they have?
I could take it out as well.
And hang on. I got to redraft this. And so if this is an issue that we don't need to address, if you don't care what the product is, the easy answer is let's delete it.
I would be comfortable with that.
Sure. Again, that's obviously, it's a majority of the board, but let's just consider simply deleting the description of the project. That may be
yes,
something.
I would be supportive of that. Then we can skip all the way to section 11, because I had some other comments and concerns, but in our preliminary conversations, those were resolved to my satisfaction. But under section 11, that's section 11B, renewal of the license, that the applicant shall apply for renewal of the marijuana establishment license at least 45 days before the expiration date on the license. I don't see where the ordinance mandates any type of notification to the applicant or to the license holder. If that's okay, that's fine, but if the board would like to include something that mandates that we notify them prior to that, or they provide some notification, otherwise I'm comfortable with it. I do plan to send out notifications to the license holders prior to that point so that they can have opportunity to renew on time. But that's not in the ordinance.
I mean, you can certainly do that, but it's no different than your driver's license. You don't get a letter from the Secretary of State saying, hey, Bob, your driver's license is going to expire in December. You know it's expired when you wake up in the middle of January and you look at your license and you say, oh, you know what? This is expired.
You say, what was that thing I got in the mail?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So you certainly can do that. There's no prohibition against you sending out a license. And I guarantee you, for the licenses that are going to be issued here, after everything they go through the state, and paying 15 grand for a state license and paying another 5 here, and going through this whole process, I guarantee you they're not going to miss the 45 days at the end of the year.
And I just want the board to know that I do plan to send out a notification as a courtesy, and also I would rather have people be compliant with the time frame rather than have them come to us later and then things get revoked because they don't get done on time and then we're kind of dealing with more work there. So the only other issue in that line, and this is strictly a clerical matter, it says renewal shall apply for renewal using forms provided by the township. Just for consistency, if we can include township clerk, because they do provide I provide the original form, so just so that's clear to them as well. The other question or concern that I know some board members have had discussions about is odor control. Under the odor control section, which is section 13B. I just so that everyone is aware that I got clarification on that the odor control mechanisms and enforcement measures are going to be the same for marijuana establishments as they are for any other business situated in the township. So there's no special evaluation. There are no specific measuring tools. It's just a matter of if someone smells it, they're going to call code enforcement, and code enforcement's going to go and see if it smells at that moment. So there is nothing special about that. It's just the same as we use for all of our other odor enforcement that we use throughout the township as well. So other than that, I'm actually set with the rest of the ordinance.
Thank you. Any further questions? Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, I just have a quick one, Mr. Siebert. In your presentation, you outlined, and I think this is probably something that we'll talk about more when we get to the zoning portion, but you indicated that the ballot initiative was structured in a way to permit unlimited number of licenses within the township, that each of these, but I was just wondering your opinion on if the spirit of the initiative is just to allow unlimited licenses, do we run the risk of maybe overkill on the locations, the zones, and then, of course, things like setbacks and measuring tools to artificially limit and then, perhaps not be in the spirit of the ballot initiative. So aren't we limiting the number of licenses by the restrictions we place on where and how far apart and so forth?
Your question's formulated differently is, as a result of the ballot proposal, don't we have to allow a marijuana establishment in every zone in the township? And the answer is no, and I have no legal problem defending that. And I think from a legal standpoint, anybody that wants to raise that has got a poor legal position, and I'm not at all concerned about that. And I have anticipated that question, and I have looked at it, and we discussed, not out loud at the Planning Commission, but I've looked at it, and I'm not concerned about that. It was raised, one board member raised it at the Planning Commission member, and I think that, and I'm not suggesting you're advocating it, but I think that legal argument is a super stretch.
No, just to clarify. So I'm not proposing that unlimited means unlimited zones or districts, I should say. Obviously, we don't have fast food places in a neighborhood. Right. So there are just common sense things. But what I'm looking at and what I'm wondering, and we could take this up a little more intensely, is the idea that we would treat it like a regular business, so if it's a like positioned business that goes in a similarly positioned zone, what about the extras? And what I'm talking about specifically is buffers and setbacks that aren't really consistent with anything that we have in the township, including measuring tools that are not even consistent with Liquor Control Commission and things like that. So we're going above and beyond those, and I'm wondering how do we then defend the heavy restrictions which limit it to what the Planning Commission deemed as appropriate zones. That's the spirit of my question.
Because number one, marijuana establishments are not like any other business. They're selling a substance that under the federal schedule is still a controlled substance. And that's why when you look at the regs from the state of Michigan, just to get a license under the state of Michigan, you don't see the state of Michigan regulating a Dairy Queen with 85 pages of single-space regulations for a Dairy Queen. And you might say, well, geez, a dispensary that's a retail dispensary is really no different than a CVS or a Walgreens, because all they're doing is in one they're coming in to buy aspirin and prescription drugs, and in the other one they're coming in to buy marijuana. drug's a drug's a drug, and there really shouldn't be any different. The difference is they're selling a product that is prohibited by the federal government, and it is heavily, heavily regulated by the state of Michigan. So you can't take the position that a marijuana establishment is just like any other business in the township. And we'll save this discussion for the board level at the zoning ordinance amendment phase. But if the argument is we have to treat a marijuana establishment that's a dispensary just like a CVS or a Walgreens, and they have a right to be in the commercial, that argument is not going to fly in court.
No, I understand.
I'll tell you
that.
right now, it's not going to fly.
No,
They want to make it.
and
Go ahead.
And I'm not an attorney. That wouldn't be what I would pay money if I were to hire an attorney to go in and argue. But what I would wonder is other municipalities around the state, adopt setbacks consistent with what is in the best interest of that community. And if we come forward with setbacks that are unlike anything else, nobody has 1,000 foot. How do we then say, where do we get 1,000 foot? It becomes very arbitrary, and it looks a lot to me and a lot of other people like perhaps we're not complying with the spirit of the ballot initiative. So again, we can have it for another time, but I'm a little worried about it. And also, when you talk about the pages and you held them up, but of all the state regulations, why would we take that and add to it? So if
We're not. We've pared it
well,
down.
I heard one of the proposals just that we're gonna make it 21. If the state license says 19, why wouldn't we just stick with in every area where we can with state regulation?
Well, if that were the case, then you'd simply take the position that, hey, they got a state license, come on into Chesterfield and open up.
Well, within reason, I think that's probably not a bad philosophy, because the alternative is what we'll do is spend time with people making arbitrary rules, and then we say that's good practice, but we have no established precedents for those kinds of things. So I would like to pick and choose what neighboring communities have done well and adopt those instead of just going solo and coming up with setbacks that aren't consistent with anybody else.
You're making a zoning ordinance argument, and that's not before the
Fair
board
enough.
tonight. That's going to be here another day. The Planning Commission spent 6 months on this, and we argued whether it ought to be 1,000 feet, ought to be 500 feet, ought to be 750 feet.
Sure.
Those are arguments that we're going to save for another day.
Sure.
If I thought that was a legal issue, I would have raised it before the Planning Commission.
No problem.
With respect to these regulations, I've looked at about every ordinance that I cared to look at in the state, and I can tell you that this regulatory ordinance is substantially less onerous than other ones like Traverse City and Grand Rapids and other communities like that have regulations more like these than ours. So I'm going to tell you right now, there's not going to be a single applicant, half of which are in the back of the room, that is going to come up and challenge this regulatory ordinance as being unreasonable or oppressive. And if they do, I would be interested in what their argument is.
No, I think you're exactly right. My argument is best, left for
Zoning.
the zoning. But I will just tell you, the 6 months of debate and vigorous 600, 700 wasn't a debate that I was really allowed to participate in it because it wasn't my opportunity. So I would just foreshadow for you, give me a wide berth when I bring it when we're talking about zoning, because I have some very strong feelings on that. And I'll wait.
It is not going to be a secret. If there's not a single member of the Planning Commission is going to be surprised when we talk about what zoning ought to be in and what the setbacks ought to be in.
Very good.
If you don't raise it, they would be shocked that you didn't.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions from the board? Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. On the age, Section 3 definition, applicant has to be at least 21 years of age. That's from the state statute,
You got to be
correct?
20. You can't walk into these places unless you're 21 years.
Correct. So the employees would also have to be 21 or more. So, okay, I just wanted to clarify that. And then do we, I think, I had asked you this question before, but for the benefit of others, if they're wondering, what happens to this ordinance should the federal government allow marijuana sale and consumption?
Nothing will happen. This is an odd situation. You have, I don't know how many states now allow recreational marijuana. Let's say there's 25. I don't know what the exact number is anymore. They keep changing. But you have, on the one hand, the federal government, which has said this is a Schedule I controlled substance. And technically, if the federal government, if Congress changed and you got in a House and a Senate that said marijuana is a bad idea, all of these would be illegal. They'd be illegal as hell. But the federal government has taken the position that they have gotten more progressive, if that's the right word, and they are not enforcing the federal law against states that have adopted recreational marijuana. If they lift that ban, that's great. The people that have the licenses can sleep a little easier at night, but it doesn't affect us at all. We're allowing it because the voters of the state of Michigan said it's okay.
Okay, thank you. And then, there's a security plan under section 6, under the application rules, 6J and K, a security plan and a lighting plan. Is that, do we require that of all businesses?
We do, and you're going to see that in the zoning ordinance when it comes before the board for the zoning ordinance amendment. For virtually every land use you have in the township, there's a lighting requirement. I mean, you've got we have an expert on the planning commission, a couple experts on the planning commission that deal with lighting. And, you can get lights now that you can put on your lot line and it doesn't go 1 inch over onto your neighbors. So they're going to have a lighting plan. And the lighting plan, by the way, and the security plan is required under the state regulations anyway. So when they show up here, they've already got those things checked off.
So that's just
Yep.
nothing new then for
Nope.
them to come here and have one more hoop to jump through?
Yep.
All right.
There should be nothing in these regulations that they haven't already in some form or fashion seen or prepared for the state.
Great, thank you. And my last one, it was already brought up, was the odor. And how is odor determined? That's been answered, and I guess that can be dealt with if and when the
When they
time
come to the building
arises.
department, they've got to have a ventilation plan. I don't know anything about it, the building official does. And there are, for any of you that gamble, you go to a casino, they have ventilators that you can smoke with 100 cigarettes underneath it, and you don't smell it, the person next to you, because of the ventilation system. I don't know what those are, but our building official does, and that will require that they have adequate ventilation.
Okay, I think everyone that lives around here goes west on I-94. From here, passes the places in Harrison Township, and you can definitely, certain times of the day, can definitely smell something. Would those places have the same, do they have the same requirement?
These are ventilation issues that your building official will deal with. Those are grow operations, if you're talking about the one I'm thinking about.
Right, probably. Do they have a different regulation?
Well, you
then?
wouldn't need one, I wouldn't expect you would need one for a retail, or if they do, it would not be the same type of ventilation system you'd have for a grow
It
operation.
depends on what they do at the retail. If they actually do some packaging there can be some odors that escape. But that's another discussion for another day. Just, thank you.
Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. In section 7, we had discussed this with the planning director about the language. It says a township certification or certificate of occupancy.
Right. You want to know what the difference is?
Yeah, and so on our website, it refers to the building department policy, township certification.
No, let me tell you exactly what it is. The certificate of occupancy is issued for a new building. The applicant wants to come in, build an X thousand square foot building. They'll go through all the typical inspections, and they'll get a certificate of occupancy at the end. If there's an existing building, that building would have already obtained a certificate of occupancy at some point in its earlier life. When that building is being rehabbed to put in a marijuana facility, they will then have to come in, and they'll go to the planning and zoning to make sure the zoning is appropriate. They'll have to go through building, get electrical, mechanical, plumbing, whatever else they need to get through building. Fire department will come in, make sure the building is up to fire codes, and at that point, they will be given a township certification that they've met all of the local ordinances. So one just deals with an existing building, one deals with new construction.
Would there be a need to refer to the building department township certification? I don't know.
No, that
there
is a
would-
term of
okay.
art. Mr. DeMaster indicated to me that process has been going on for 30 years.
Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. This discussion that we just had here is a reminder, a deja vu for me on what happened over a year ago. I think we need to hit the pause button here for a few of the members on this board. Just to go back, I mean, you know, to me, by listening to the questioning, this board still doesn't have it right. I mean, when this was brought up, and it was brought up by Trustee Joseph and Trustee Anderson and Clerk Barry, the key here that they're talking about is unlimited. When Trustee Joseph, Trustee Anderson, and Clerk Barry brought it up, they had 5 on there. They were limited to 5 establishments in this community. There was a discussion, there were questions, there was confusion. Same confusion and discussion that I seen tonight was from the same players, happened again tonight. They've got an attorney at their disposal here that we pay for at any given time prior to this meeting. They can pick up that phone and contact Mr. Seberg. Mr. Seberg will talk to any one of them. But instead, no, just because you're asking questions doesn't make you smart. So these are questions that should have been asked before this meeting. And at the last one, I had Kathy Elliott ask, what's 1,000 feet? I mean, 1,000 feet is 10 football fields. I mean, when I've got a sitting treasurer up there that doesn't know what 1,000 feet is, I'm worried. So, and I'm worried by listening to this questioning. There's still a ton of confusion going on here with what they want to pass tonight. So I think until there's clarity and there's a meeting, I think the pause button should be hit on this until everybody is on the same page, and everybody is not on the same page. And we wouldn't be here today had it not been for Trustee Demink, Kathy Vosberg, Treasurer Elliott, and Brad Kersten that said no to the 5 establishments that Trustee Joseph, Trustee Anderson, and Clerk Barry wanted to implement. Instead of going from 5, now we're going to unlimited because of the 4 people on this right-hand side of the board. So again, it goes back to having competent people that understand what's going on and qualified individuals up there representing us. Because does everybody really want to have one of these shops on every corner like a gas station? I know I don't. I want to have some sort of control. I'm not against them coming in, but I don't want one on every corner either. So, and I know they have to go in certain zoning districts, but we could have had control of this situation back then with the 5 versus the unlimited now. And there's confusion. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public?
Good evening, Rob Huth, 19500 Hall Road, Clinton Township. I've served more on that side of the table than on this side in terms of representing municipalities that have enacted ordinances, Harrison Township, City of Detroit, Pontiac, and such. And I would first like to start off by thanking you for this process and the way it's been run. And the reason is that I know not all of you were in favor of this. So you philosophically and for reasons that were well understood, some of you are for it, some of you are against it, but the voters enacted an ordinance in November, and in response to that ordinance, you have followed the direction and the intent to come up with a plan, a process. It's been transparent, it's been well vetted at the Planning Commission, and you've taken quite a bit of comment at that level. I will say a couple things with respect to the ballot initiative. The ballot initiative did speak to unlimited, but what's going to happen after this board's done acting is it will really end up being a limited amount of retail establishments permitted. Your ordinance is going to track similar to the one in Mount Clemens that is supposedly unlimited, 5 or 6 establishments allowed in Mount Clemens. It's similar to what is enacted in Oxford, supposedly unlimited, 4 establishments allowed in Oxford. No litigation, a process that was uncomplicated in Oxford because there they relied on the information that is supplied to Laura. I've served as a city attorney in Harrison Township and was one of the first communities to allow 4 of the 5 licenses there. We viewed it as very uncomplicated. We understood that if the applicant made it through the state of Michigan and got to the Harrison Township clerk, it had been pretty well vetted, and the board took action to make sure that these folks weren't repeating the regulatory requirements. So I compliment you on that, the way this is set up. This regulatory ordinance is done very well. I agree with the analysis that it would be very difficult to make this one that also worked for medical providers. There are different rules for medical. In fact, last I checked, you only needed to be 18 to work in one of those provisioning centers compared to this. And so you can imagine the difficulties of having co-locations in an ordinance. So thank you for your work so far. We appreciate it. And council's correct. Can't think of a way to criticize it in court or from here from the podium. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate it. Any further comments from the public? Bring it back up to the board. Sorry, sir.
Okay, hello, my name is Mark Abraham. Everybody on this board has seen me here for every meeting, all the way from Mr. Demink to Mr. Anderson. I also appreciate all the work that's been done. Mr. Demink's had to sit on both boards. Long, arduous process. I agree with almost everything that Mr. Huth just said. I have one difference in opinion on what he's just said. Other than that, I believe in a lot of that. I'd like to just say, again, thank you for the work you've done to get us to this point today. For 3 years, I looked for a site in this city based on 1,000 feet and 1,000 feet and 1,000 feet. I know that the board members realize that all the uses don't have to be 1,000 feet. It could be grow is 1,000 from residential and all the others, but it's really this close to impossible to find a site for provisioning at 1,000 feet. Trust me, I live right around this area. I've worked my tail off to find a site, and I couldn't find a site for 3 years. Okay, finally, a very nice person helped me to find a site. Everything was groovy. I got this site, it was 1,000 feet and 1,000 feet, and then we did our measuring based on the current way that we measure from the building to the lot line, and it lands in the middle of my building at 1,000 feet. So there I go again. It's not gonna work there again. That's a really tough pill to swallow. As it stands right now, there's only one site that's available that will comply with this very strict regimen. And this is the piece that I disagree with Mr. Huth respectfully. In all the cities that he outlined, there was more than one location. I think that everybody would agree that there should be more than one location. But that number, and also would agree that we don't want unlimited, a true unlimited. However, I do feel that something has to change very slightly to allow for a competitive process. Right now at 1,000 feet, one site, that's it. That's all we have. There's acres and acres available. None of it's for sale, none of it's available, none of it's gonna work. I mean, what is available right now? That's what matters to the operators. So what I would like to, if we used the measuring tool that is used by the state of Michigan for the Liquor Control Commission, which everybody's familiar with, it changes only one simple thing, and that is instead of from the edge of the building to the lot line, it draws a line out to the street in front of the building, and it just scores the arc that way. It gives this much more room. But I want everyone to understand this much more room opens up a lot of different opportunities. It makes a huge difference, 50 feet, 100 feet. Little bits make way more opportunities. At the end, I'm here today to ask the City Council to consider adopting this measuring tool use to buffer that we're using, that the state uses as liquor control. The only difference in this method I just outlined to you.
I got to cut you off. Hit the time limit. Thank you. Any further questions?
Mike Orton, 50393 Bauer. So I don't know if there had been any discussion regarding this issue since February's timeframe, but according to what I remembered this story several weeks back, it was from the Free Press, and it was that Michigan communities share in $60 million recreational marijuana tax revenue. 224 municipalities and counties that have recreational marijuana dispensaries or micro businesses will split a piece of that revenue collected in the 10% adult use marijuana excise tax, with each receiving about $52,000 for every licensed retail store and micro business. Sounds very profitable for the communities that have already established businesses. And the question has to remain for Chesterfield, why are we so far behind on this discussion? Whether you're for or against it, why is it taking so long? This is government inaction that everyone despises. That it just seems like this debate goes on and on and on and on. And how many times we have gone over the past several years talking about the distance businesses are allowed to have from certain things. How many times have we had these same exact arguments time and time again? It is deja vu. 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. When was this supposed to be settled? The vote statewide was 2018. So you've had since November 2018 to have these proper debates and discussions. It's 4.5 years. 4.5 years is like the entire length of World War II that the U.S. was involved in. Like that, it's a long time, and yet we can't solve a simple issue like this. It's disrespectful for the community as a whole because we're up in limbo. We don't know what to do. You know, and I'll add to that, if you're so concerned about everybody's protection and safety regarding the issue, you know, I clean up my neighborhood all the time, and I see cigarette butts everywhere, liquor bottles, things that go into the human body that you shouldn't be saying on public situations. And I'll even clean it up at the middle school. You know, I take Macy with me. Sometimes she takes me, but and we clean up because the township is dirty all the time, and it needs to be cleaned up. But you see a lot of terrible stuff along the ground. The pot's not going to change that. This is coming from someone who's never done it, and never will. But solve the problem. Be for it or against it. Just figure it out and stop dragging this along, because this is probably going to be an issue at the way this board is doing it, probably going to be dragged out till like 2026, 2027, 2028. Meanwhile, everybody else benefits, or they just continue on.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public?
Rich Brokart, 49488 Compass Point. A lot of you know me. I sit on the Zoning and Planning Commission. Interesting meeting here tonight. I've been involved since January, and the Zoning and Planning Committee has worked really hard on it. A lot of my friends here I've met and worked with every other week since January on this. I think we have a really good plan, and you'll be looking at it. And I'm going to ask you to really take a good look at it. Talk to Robert if you have questions. We've worked really, really hard on it. The question was asked, should we treat it like a regular business? I think we should treat it like a regular business, but what is a regular business? A Culver's burger joint that the people didn't want on 23? A gas station on Gratiot that we unanimously voted in and we were overturned? What about a strip mall on 26? We're working really hard here, and you guys are overturning unanimous votes from the Zoning and Planning Commission. And it's offensive to me when that happens because I get no rationale. Did I do something wrong? Was my data incorrect? My mom was a teacher. She taught me two things. Do your homework and listen. I did my homework. I do my homework. And I'm listening to everybody. It's going to get fixed. It's going to get in. Chesterfield voted this in November, so it's 7 months. It'll work. This is a great group of guys and gals, and we should have a little bit of faith in them. So I'm going to ask you, please, if you overrule the Zoning and Planning Commission, just tell us why, so we can learn and get better. We'll listen to you. I'm going to ask you, please, listen to us on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Chris Aiello, Compass Point. So it's been 3 years and we're sort of back right here, deja vu, right where we were, coming up to that magical vote in June. But the purpose that I really wanted to get up here and talk about was Clerk Berry was right on point. As an attorney in the cannabis industry, I've run into this problem. If it's not a tickler in the calendar, the date to renew your permit or your license in the municipality, it becomes a problem. So I ran across that problem in Lapeer, but a little more lackadaisical community allowed 10 days not to be a problem, but the clerk did send out notice. So I think she's dead on right that we need something sort of along the lines of due process to be inside of the ordinance to allow anybody that has a license to know that that 45 days is coming up, and she sends out a notice 60 days out or something. That could work hand in hand with the community and any corporation that sets up business in Chesterfield. I know we have the zoning aspect to talk about coming up in June, but we're right back again where we were before the petition was filed and after the petition results came out. And the buffer analysis is overwhelming. You'll be presented with a letter, and about 25 communities in the state of Michigan that have houses of less than 500 feet or don't even have houses or buffers, or some in Macomb County like East Point that have buffers from a home of 50 feet. 1,000 feet is literally outrageous. There's really nothing much to protect a home from a store that does business just like everyone else. But I hope we can pick this discussion up so that everyone's treated fairly in the community. Everyone that participated in this long 3-year process, from the Cannabis Committee to the last vote before the board, then the petition, then post-petition, and we're here again right back at the same spot we were. I heard my neighbor, great guy Rich, about the hard work that the Planning Commission did, and all the hard work that the Cannabis Committee they did. But I did hear Mark's comments about measurement tools. It's vitally important, and it's a good compromise what Mark comes up with. We'll present it to you in writing and present 25 different ordinances that'll help you make a decision in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder to everybody, this is the regulatory ordinance. This isn't the zoning proposal that is forthcoming. This is just the draft regulatory ordinance for cannabis. So you limit your comments just to the regulatory side. Any further comments from the public? No further comments. I'll bring it back up to the board. Clerk Berry, did you kept track?
Mr. Supervisor, if you, as the motion maker, would be willing to amend your motion, I would you'd have my continued support for the following changes to the publication, the first publication of the regulatory ordinance for cannabis. Change number 1, under Section 3 definitions, that business manager also be identified as someone 21 years of age. Under Section 6, Sub 2D1, that the denial of an application for marijuana establishment by the state or other municipality had a marijuana establishment license suspended or revoked based on a final determination, if we can include that language. I'm sorry, Bob, you ready? Okay. Section 6, Sub G, to change the language state license to MRTMA pre-approval. Delete sub I1, which is the description of products. And final change under section 11 to include clerk after the word township under sub B, section 11 sub B, just for clarity.
And I will continue my motion for those, with those requested changes. With that being said, Clerk Berry, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Item 10, addendums. There are no addendums tonight. Item 11, public comments. There's a 5-minute time limit to speak. If you would like, you can state your name, and the clock will begin when you begin to speak.
Hi, I'll keep this short. My name is Roger McCauley, 25173 Lock Drive North. I sent over a request for a FOIA on general election results of November 8, 2022. I was wondering if there's been any determination on that. My apologies, I just sent it over Monday morning. I meant to send it last week and my email didn't work.
Township Council can address the FOIA issue.
We're in receipt of the FOIA, and we'll process it.
Okay, one other question. Do you still have, I know there was an email sent out by the Secretary of State telling municipalities like yourselves to delete the electronic poll books. Do you know if you've deleted those, or do you still have those?
I'll defer, Clerk Berry.
Electronic poll books have not been deleted.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, we're back here again. My name's Jeff Baker. I'm here to shed some light on the despicable incompetence of the Chesterfield Township Police Department and the township's leaders. First, let me say that none of my comments are meant to disparage any of the Chesterfield police officers' work in the streets. They are fine men and women who I greatly respect. This is about the police department and the township leadership, or lack thereof. After the last board meeting, there was a lot of negative media attention on those charged with leading this township for firing my son, Josh, after he asked his supervisor for mental health help due to trauma experienced on the job as a police officer. After just 3 days of negative media attention, this incompetent administration offered my son his job back. But the conditions of this offer are completely unacceptable. First off, they did not offer him mental health treatment. In fact, they specifically stated that if Josh was not able to come back to work due to mental health concerns, that he'd be required to take an unpaid leave and the department would not assist him in any way with medical health treatment other than Josh using his township-provided insurance. They also added the caveat that if Josh wasn't to return in 6 months due to mental health concerns, he would be fired again. At the last board meeting, we heard a proclamation by this board recognizing May as Mental Health Awareness Month, but there is no substance to what they say, no action to back up those words, and the hypocrisy is both disgusting and laughable. As most of you know, the trauma my son experienced resulting from a call he responded to in which a little girl was hit by a truck. I want to ask any of you listening to this if this might mess you up. Officer Baker advised that upon arrival, he observed a child face down under a pickup who he believed was not breathing. Officer Baker removed the child thinking he was going to perform CPR. Officer Baker advised that he removed the child. She began to cry. Officer Baker stated that her stomach was unusually bulged on her left side. She had a large amount of hair ripped out of her head and she was squirming in pain. Officer Baker advised that the child could not get comfortable, so he moved her to the driver's seat of the pickup truck. Officer Baker stated the child began to go in and out of consciousness. Officer Baker stated that approximately 10 minutes had passed and MedStar was still not on scene. An ETA was requested and officers advised that they were still 10 minutes away. Officer Baker advised that the travel time to McLaren Hospital was approximately 10 to 15 minutes away. Officer Baker advised the sergeant that he had to make the decision to wait another 10 minutes or to make the transport with New Baltimore PD.
Officer Baker advised the child's health was deteriorating and indicated that if he waited any longer, there was a high probability that she may lose her life. Officer Baker made the decision to transport the child and link with MedStar along the way. He advised the sergeant that he held the child in the back seat while the officer from New Baltimore transported. Officer Baker advised that while en route, he had to constantly wake the victim up and talk to her, keep her eyes open. He also advised her breathing became more shallow and she was groaning while breathing. Eventually, they linked up. That's all on body cam. You wonder what I'm reading? That's the investigation conducted by the Chesterfield Police Department regarding the little girl hit by a truck. Imagine being there. Imagine holding this precious little girl in your arms. He held her for 13 and a half minutes. Imagine thinking she's dying for 13 and a half minutes. Her blood is all over you. Imagine later you're told by the highest ranking officer in the department that he was glad you went on the call, glad you transported that little girl to the ambulance, that you 100% made the right call. Imagine that after an ensuing 82-day investigation, which results in you being given a written reprimand by that same boss just 2 days before Christmas. Does it bother you to hear this? Imagine living this for 5 months, all the while going on the road and responding to calls, doing your job, all the while struggling, facing inner demons, having nightmares. You can't eat, you can't sleep. You're watching your own personal life fall apart while you're still trying to go to work to help others deal with theirs. You're up at night wondering why horrific things happen to innocent little girls. You just can't take it anymore and you ask for help. And then you're investigating, you're terminated 2 months later. No help, no calls of care. No, hey Josh, how are you holding up? None. In fact, you're stripped of your access to the building and escorted in and out. Imagine after all of this being brave enough to ask for help, you're fired. You've led the department in many aspects, training, public presentations, union work, Officer of the Year. You're decorated. And the incompetent individuals running this place declare May Mental Health Awareness Month. The most incompetent of all sitting in the center right up there, the most incompetent of all sitting right up there in the center said that the last meeting, many people suffering with mental health issues don't come forward for help. Mine did. Can any of you imagine being in this situation? Your township supervisor felt pressured and offered my son his job back. He crumbled under pressure in 3 days. My son's been struggling and fighting for 7 months. No one noticed until we called asking for help, and he was fired. I got just a couple more seconds. The incompetency is overwhelming. The township and its morale is a disaster. Brad Kersten, you need to step down and relinquish your role to someone who has integrity and intelligence to lead.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is Michelle Baker, and I'm Josh's stepmother. My husband just spoke about the incident which traumatized our son and the investigation that followed. He referred to a call made by Chief Bassett, and I'd like to play that message for you now.
I didn't know if anybody had gotten you any status or anything update, but the little girl is downtown at Children's, and her condition right now is listed as critical but stable. She's in a medically induced coma. So again, if I get additional this weekend, I asked if they could try and keep us updated. I will try and share that with you if you'd like me to. If you don't, I understand too. But so I will try and get that to you if I do get anything. Either way, you 100% made the right call, and I'm glad you went over there and then also threw in and went. So if you don't have to call me back, no need to. If you want to call me back, feel free. All right, I'll talk to you. Bye.
We all just heard Josh being praised by his chief for making the right call. Yet 82 days later, the same chief issued Josh a written reprimand for assisting another agency without prior approval and transporting a sick or injured person in a police vehicle. Which is it, Chief? Did he make the right call or not? Is there any parent or grandparent listening to this that wouldn't be grateful to Josh for what he did to save a small child's life? If you were to ask Josh today, he would say that he would do it all over again, even if it would cost him everything. Our actions say everything about the kind of people that we truly are, and that is the person that Josh is. I received the following message last week from a local mother who heard Josh's story. Hello, Michelle. I stumbled upon this story about your son and burst into tears. My son went through the Chesterfield Junior Public Safety Academy with your son being his leader. He absolutely loves him, respects him, and looks up to him. I am so sorry to hear what happened to him. As a former CPS worker who still has nightmares from the things I saw, my heart is broken for him and for your family. Please tell Josh that my little boy loves him, believes in him, and is praying for him. Josh had an unforgettable impact on my son, and he will carry that with him forever. He left the academy and said, "Mom, Officer Baker is my best friend." He stops and thinks about choices he's had to make by asking, what would Officer Baker say or do? The genuine, true care and mentoring that your son provided my son is something I could never repay him for, and I am forever grateful. Josh is my son's hero, and I hope he knows that. There's a well-known quote out there that says, 100 years from now, it won't matter what kind of car I drove, what kind of house I had, or how much money I had in the bank. What matters is that I made a difference in the life of a child. I am so proud of Josh for the difference that he has made in this child's life and in that little girl's life the day of the accident. This is the kind of officer that your township supervisor turned his back on and then fired. On March 3rd, Josh was told he couldn't come to work because he was not fit for duty due to mental health reasons. Last week, he was offered his job back, and in that offer, it said that Chesterfield would not assist him or support him with mental health treatment, nor did they require an evaluation to determine if he was even okay to return to work. Does this make sense to anyone? On March 3rd, they said he was unfit to work as a police officer. They provided him no help, even though he asked for it. And now, they no longer seem to care if he is fit for duty and have offered him his job back. In the last 2 weeks, Josh's story has been viewed over 1 million times on social media. We have had hundreds of people reach out to show us support, and many first responders sharing their stories of how many of them suffer in silence for fear of exactly what happened to Josh. The other day, the State of Maine's Association of Police shared Josh's story and said the following: with all that we know about first responders and trauma, it is gut-wrenching and infuriating that municipalities and department administration are still woefully behind in their response or support of those responders who are suffering. We can and must do better in protecting and supporting our protectors. Those struggling with trauma are not a line item on a budget, nor are they disposable as damaged goods. How is this still the status quo in so many places? Shameful. This police agency, like so many others, is using Chesterfield as a shameful example of what not to do. Now is the time for your township supervisor and chief of police to do the right thing for the first responders and citizens of Chesterfield and step down from their roles. Thank you.
John Spica, 53978 Connor Drive. Supervisor Kersten, at the last township meeting, I asked you to step down, resign. I wanted your immediate resignation the following day. You didn't listen. The day after the board meeting, Supervisor Kersten held a fundraiser at Louis Chop House for his re-election for next year's election. On Thursday, he held the photo op, and on Friday, he held the photo op. Then Saturday rolled around. We had an open house for the police department, and Kersten, Supervisor Kersten, was nowhere to be found. A former director of public safety is MIA during an open house for our men and women that protect this community. Unacceptable. Where was the backing for our men and women? He's MIA. Trustee Joseph was there. I seen Trustee Anderson was there. I seen Clerk Barry there. I seen Mr. Demink there. Mr. Demink, when the firing went down, Mr. Demink at the last board meeting was radio silent on this. I hear from him all the time how our police officers and our first responders are a top priority. But yet, when this discussion was up here at the last township board meeting, he stood radio silent. The only person that I heard was Trustee Joseph and Trustee Anderson speak about getting Josh Baker the help he needed. Everyone else was radio silent. But I can guarantee you next year when they all run for re-election, you're going to see in their flyers, police and fire, you're going to see the American flag, and they're going to ask for your vote. But when it comes right down to it, you know who stands with police and fire. Now, on the front page of The Voice that came out this Wednesday, you know what the front page of The Voice should have had on there? I'm going to tell you what it should have had. It should have had hero police officer Josh Baker saves 7-year-old, fired by Supervisor Kersten while on vacation in Florida. He fires one of our top heroes while he's on vacation. Channel 2 did a thing, and they actually showed two things. They showed Kersten's signature with the firing of Officer Josh Baker, a hero in this community. What an insult to try to bring this officer back under the conditions that the family just said. And again, to this family, to Mr. Baker and Mrs. Baker, I apologize for what Supervisor Kersten did. That is unacceptable. That is not who we are in Chesterfield. And you're right, he is incompetent and should not be sitting in that seat and needs to resign effective immediately. So, unfortunately, so he's got a few more board members are going to have to push him to resign to do the right thing. So, and this is what you get when you get incompetent people sitting in positions that they shouldn't be. And I hammered this time and over again. And this is why we see the chaos that we see. But your son, for what he did, thank you. I thank Josh. And thank you for coming here and standing up and telling the people his story because it needed to be heard. And I thank Trustee Joseph, I thank Trustee Anderson for standing up and trying to get this police officer the help that he needs. I'm disappointed in Trustee Demink because he stood down and said nothing. As a police officer and currently working for Sterling Heights, that is unacceptable. He should have been the first one telling Supervisor Kersten that was wrong. You need to rectify this situation. We need to get Josh Baker the help he needs and not fire him. So instead of Supervisor Kersten telling Trustee Joseph to stand down, no, Trustee Joseph didn't stand down. Trustee Joseph fought like he always does and does the right thing for this community. Another example of that, Trustee Joseph got a phone call from a neighbor. They've had garbage in their street for 2 weeks. Calls to the supervisor's office unanswered for 2 weeks. Trustee Joseph takes his vehicle, loads the garbage up, and makes sure that that garbage is clear. When I say garbage, I'm not talking garbage bags. I'm talking about full-size garbage, furniture, TVs. So.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any further comments from the public?
Nancy Hutchinson, 49525 Callens. I had not prepared to get up today. I was laying on my couch watching the last meeting, and I debated whether I needed to put shoes on and come here and speak before this board, but couldn't because I was crying. As the mother of a police officer, I don't know how you sleep at night knowing your child is going through this with no help whatsoever. And I'm sorry, but I know I fired off an email to Mr. Joseph. I don't know if you got it, but I was fired off a very angry email, and I think the least the police department could do is pay for Josh's mental health care. I'm sure he doesn't want his job back. I'm sure he will not come back and work for this department. But East Point's a great place to work. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further comments? Any further comments from the public?
Mark Renault, 51786 Adler Park. I'm going to change directions just a minute and touch on what my, I serve on the zoning board here for Chesterfield Township as well as the Board of Review. And to touch on what Rick said earlier, last week at the last Township Board meeting, there was a item shot down by this board here, even though it was unanimously approved by the zoning board. I'd like to think that a zoning board that's comprised of engineers, architects, electricians, finance folks, such as myself, an arborist on top of that, has a pretty good idea when things are good or not so good for the township. And while, as all of you, most of you as elected officials know, you can't make everyone happy. There are just going to be some people that aren't going to be happy with what's decided, and some people will be happy. No different than the cannabis prop that went through. Only 56.5% of those that voted actually put it into place, so we've been working on it very hard the last several years. But when we get our unanimous decisions overturned by the board with absolutely no explanation whatsoever, I do kind of take offense at that. We have a lot of experience, worked very hard on that, and so I'd like to suggest this board, moving forward, if you do move in those directions, if you could at least let us know, because if we're doing something wrong, I think we'd like to know that so we can at least do better, because the folks that are here and care enough about the township, on many instances, we'd like to make sure we're serving them in the best possible way. So, but it suggests that when you do that in the future, please let us know what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Renault.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments?
Hello, my name is Christine Dunduvan, 52057 Pebble Creek Drive. I just want to commend Mr. and Mrs. Baker and your son for everything he has endured over the last 7 months. I myself am a child or daughter and a sister of law enforcement officers, and I can't tell you what it was like growing up as my father, when he would leave the house, not knowing what was going to happen when he came home, what kind of moods how it would affect him, how it would affect my brother, how it would affect a lot of my best friends and other family members that are public safety. I stand with you, and I hope Chesterfield will pay for your son's mental health and his well-being. I too recommend Supervisor Kersten to step down.
Joe Kadich, live on Sutton. I don't think I have much to add. I agree with everything that's been said here. But I'd just like to bring up one thing. The other thing that almost happened at the last meeting was this board was prepared to reduce the time that you're allowed to speak, make comments to them, to basically, on all of the agenda items and including the public comments at the end, 6 minutes total. So you know where this thing is coming from. You know why this happened. He's basically trying to rule this thing like an empire. But I'd like to remind you one thing, Brad. When I was discussing offering things to you about the water department, the police department, do you remember what your comment was to me back? Don't tell me how to run my police department or my water department. Now the public sees how you run the police department. They saw what's going on with the water department. I don't think you got a chance at the next election. You may do yourself a favor and resign right now.
Mike Rayner, 26175 Jack Grove Lane. I'm a pretty emotional, angry guy when personal things, personal meaning, people things happen. I'm so absolutely disgusted that we really don't care about each other anymore. I can't believe that this is happening. Maybe it's because I'm kind of from a different era when respect meant something. What these folks, and especially their son, has gone through is just inexcusable. The nonsense that the excuses that they use for terminating him have to be expunged from his record. The police department has to take a closer look at how they evaluate what their officers do, especially when they're making an effort to do the right thing. You know, doing the right thing doesn't seem to matter anymore. It all has to do with the laws and regulations and these ordinances. And I went through similar things myself, trying to do the right thing, and some Mickey Mouse ordinance prevented me from doing it. One of my grandsons is a policeman, and one is an EMT. And I think especially of my grandson, Jake, who's an EMT, who encounters this sort of situation every day, and how he endures it. I mean, I have no idea. I don't know how he does that. I told him, hey, Jake, on my first call, it would be over with for me. The stories that you tell me, it just is so heart-wrenching. And this is as great an example as any. And we have to do something about this. We have to kind of, get our feet on the ground and look at each other in the eye and start doing the right thing. We're in big trouble here, folks. This is one of the best examples of a very bad situation. So I hope we can go home at night, and when it's time to finally pull up the covers, to think real closely about how we're acting individually in this divided states of America we're living in. This shouldn't be the all about me society. This has to be the all about us society, but that's not what it is. Thank you.
Any further comments?
Mike Wharton, 50393 Bauer. So one of the things I have discussed here many times is the importance of trust, and that of trust between leaders and their communities that they represent. That the concept of what the tribal chief basically is throughout all of our human history. The concept that if we are to have a leader, that they're the person that earns the trust and respectability for the people they represent, their tribe. Thus being our community here, Chesterfield, that is what we entrust to the supervisor in the form of the government. The reason I say all this is because, well, 2 years ago when the supervisor was put in via the interim spot, there were several of us some of us in the group or the audience today who wanted to seek out that position as well. One of them was myself. When I was a part-time firefighter, I emailed that to the supervisor, who was the public safety director. At the time, I had asked him if it were doable for me to, if I were to get the position, be able to perform paid on-call duties as a firefighter, because I thought it would have been a cool idea, having a township leader be present at fire scenes helping out. Well, that was not doable, but never once did he say anything about himself becoming the supervisor. And so it was a complete and total shock when I found out at the next meeting that he was being selected by the board. Didn't explain it to me. I go to his retirement party from the police department. In the room full of police officers and firefighters, says that he saw the candidates running and none of them were pro-cop or pro-fire. This was a shock to me, being the son of a 25-year cop and at the time a firefighter for the township, that I was no longer pro-cop and pro-fire. When did this happen? Aside from this, at the swearing in the selection for being the supervisor, he comes in and shakes my hand and says, "Now I get to keep you as a firefighter." but had no intentions of expanding the full-time fire department. So was my only position to be a part-time firefighter for the rest of the time in this township? As my skill sets are not good enough for anything other than that? Aside from all that, the main reason I bring all this up for the concept of trust is that we need to address something in our society, and that is what political power is. In my viewpoint, political power is a narcotic. Now, if you know what narcotics do, they can do good things. They bring people back from the dead. They can give people superhuman abilities. They can make a person confident or strong enough to do certain things and make them feel good. But so often, what happens when people take too much narcotics? They become addicts. Political power is that of influence, of control, of authority. So often, people get it and they don't want to give it up. Stay in office, ascend to higher office. That's the goal of a political junkie. I say all of this now because, sir, why do you subject us to what is obviously a loss of trust? Whether it be from the community, from the people who live here, from the people who work here. Think of the mass exodus of employees that has occurred in just the last couple years alone. It wasn't just me that left the fire department. It was at least 24 part-time firefighters, the ones you prided in recruiting. Where is the 2020, 2021 public safety mass picture? I do not see it in here anymore because like half the people are gone from it. What happened to this township that we lost the trust in our government, and especially in our supervisor? Your intention is to run for a re-election. You wish to subject the people to another 4 years after the next 18 months? This is about trust. And to be perfectly honest, the person who hurts the most from all this is you, Supervisor Kersten. And I say this out of compassion. You are not the same person you were 2 years ago. You have been degraded physically, mentally, and emotionally, and everyone can see it. So for the good of the township and for the good of yourself, I ask you, please, step down and give way to other people to serve out the community. Because that is the benefit for everyone, including yourself. Thank you.
Any further comments? Anything further? Bring it back up to the board. Trustee Demink.
I've heard enough tonight. Motion to adjourn.
Support.
Motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn by Trustee
Mr.
Demink,
Supervisor?
supported by Trustee Vosberg.
Mr. Supervisor,
Clerk
is there discussion on the motion?
Clerk Berry.
Is there discussion on the motion?
It's non-debatable.
Well, the residents want to stay, I'll speak, and I'll stay as long as you want when they go home. So just let them go home, and I'll stay and speak.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
Of course not. Come on, Demink. No.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Here.
That was an aye vote.
That was an aye? Very affirmative. Thank you.
Supervisor Kersten.
Of course.
Clerk Berry, no.
Meeting's adjourned at 9:43.
Feel free to keep your seats, folks. I'll stay here as long as you want.